Gentlemen, congratulations.
Thank you.
You've left the Chinese theater somewhat speechless. Rumaan, the story begins with you. So the first question is, how do you sleep at night?
Well, I watch Friends and then I get right into bed. Sleep pretty well, yeah.
How did the story of this story begin?
The story, I think the story began with being a parent. I think that there are so many opportunities when you have a child to be reminded of how tenuous the bargain of everyday life is. One moment that really stands out for me is the first time we put our older son on the school bus. Some stranger you've never seen drives this rickety bus, and you put your 4-year-old on the bus and say, okay, I'll see you later, and you just drive off into Brooklyn, and you do see them later. They do come back, but that particular bargain of letting the person you love the most go out into the world every day is how we all actually live.
That was a turning point for me in this film, which we'll get to tonality and the rest later, but there's the moment where the son turns back toward the family in the kitchen and says, we're going to be okay, right? And it never fails to kind of hit me right here. You know, it's like, well, it's a complicated parental question. And so, Sam, you told us you read the book at a pretty dark time in all of our lives. And what made you choose this moment to then, because it's a giant investment.
I've always been a fan of the disaster genre, and I think one of the reasons why, it's kind of like, it harkens back to like the sort of the classic campfire tales, where you would talk about the things that scared you, and the fears that you have, and the anxieties that you have, and through storytelling, you work through that. You work through that trauma or the fears, but within a community, you're sharing that with your fellow colleagues, your families, your friends, and that was the sensation that I got when I read the book, is that this was just a campfire tale of our times. For me, visualizing the film as a disaster film, which I guess disaster films are all pretty much these campfire tales, but the monster is the unknown, is the not knowing, and that's the connection that I had when at the time was the pandemic, where we were really in the dark, and it was the not knowing that was the part that scared us the most, but also what started to divide us. And I loved that we sort of inverted the disaster film kind of formula, because disaster films are usually like centered on these big set pieces, right? And the characters typically are secondary. Not that that's a knock. I love disaster films. The Day After Tomorrow is one of my favorites, even though I'm a little biased because my wife's in it. But I just thought this could be an interesting opportunity to flip that around and make the characters the center of the story, and the disaster elements are more off in the distance.
Mm-hmm. And it's rare to have the novelist and the person who adapted the material still speaking to each other. How did that collaboration work between you?
Oh, Sam's giving me a very meaningful look, so I guess I'll answer the question. I think it worked really beautifully. I think we had our first conversation was not necessarily about the book or what Sam envisioned the movie being. It was about like what was I thinking about when I was writing the book? Like, what movies do I like? What movies did it make him think of? I told you that I was thinking about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and then we talked about that movie, and so we just had a kind of conversation as colleagues, and I think that sort of established the tone for what we were able to do over the subsequent years to, we got along really well, and I think that I had a lot of faith in Sam's vision, and when I saw this script, I was like, well, this is amazing, it's gonna be amazing, and it is.
Yeah, intentionality was the key, right? I think we agreed on the intentions, and obviously things that worked in the literary form had to be, translated into a cinematic form, and Rumaan had respected my process in trying to figure that out and gave me the room to do that. And then I would obviously come back to Rumaan and let him know these are the changes. And he, it was a really amazing collaboration.
And I believe you. Look at that. That's great. So, Rumaan, when you're reading a novel, what ends up during an adaptation is what you imagine in your mind of that world is rarely what you see up on screen. But as the novelist, did you feel that way about this? And when you watch the film, is there anything that this art form allowed you to see that you didn't when you were first writing?
Yeah, of course. When something exists on the page, every reader is sort of seeing it as their own sort of private film, and I include myself in that. But a film contains all of these other layers. There's a shot early in the movie when the camera sort of swoops up the stairs through the house, and the house, it sort of changes how the space feels, and there's a sense of menace, or that this house is so vast, or it just destabilizes you just as you enter the house. And then there are things like the music, which is so present. I mean, just a filmmaker has access to tools that a writer doesn't. And so Sam's vision of this whole world that includes sound and movement and performance, of course it differs from whatever existed in my head, but whatever existed in my head was just for me anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
Todd, let's talk about movement. I have rarely seen a film where the camera moves as much as this one, and including even quiet moments like when Julia first enters the house and goes up that kind of Escher stairway, spinning around. Talk about that decision to do that. I'm sure it was in collaboration, but you were the man on the scene. How did that come to be?
Sam told me to move the camera. No, obviously it was a collaboration, but it was, a lot of what happened in there, it is all Sam. We know we wanted to do something unique. There was a good moment in the beginning where we tried to name a typical shot that we do. We ended up calling it the swizzle. It's where the camera, when GH is at the beach, and we move up and left, and the side of the frame moves north and south rather than the top and bottom. And we were trying to explain it to operators and everyone else. And finally, I don't remember who came up with it, but somebody finally called it the swizzle, and that's what we use from there on out. And it was in prep when we figured that term out. And now I still hear. I just finished a movie here, and somebody came with me like, "Hey, are you guys going to do that swizzle thing again?" So, but yeah. So that's kind of what we came up with there. But the moving of the camera, I think, the one that I probably like the most, we just have to establish a line, character A looks left to right and B looks, right to left. We constantly hop and move around that line, which I think really creates, the instability, amongst these guys in this movie. So I don't know, there was a lot of things that we went for, and I think it really paid off. I'm really proud of it.
It did. And Rumaan, you mentioned the music. Mac, you've collaborated, of course, with Sam on Mr. Robot. In fact, you won an Emmy, I believe, for your score of that TV series. What was the collaboration like on this? Where did you find inspiration for keeping us up later tonight?
It was a conversation about this weird. I don't know where you found this music, but
I honestly, I don't know. I don't know where I find half my music. It was weird though. It was this weird avant-garde European orchestral,
neoclassical
that I listened to constantly while writing the script. And I said, Mac, do this. But thank God you didn't do that, because you did something.
It was the touchstone to get me started,
Yeah.
and I needed a way in, and I discovered this French composer named Olivier Messiaen, and these modes that he came up with in like the 1940s. And I picked one of these modes, and I thought there's something about it that would allow me to bump up against this rule and find some interesting musical ideas and kind of free me from my normal thing. And I wrote a few pieces, sent them to Sam. He really liked them.
And you were it was only 12 notes that throughout the whole, is it
9
notes.
And that was freeing, but it was also, I would do a harmonic movement that I kind of instinctually, but I would use one of these notes I'm not supposed to use, so now I'd have to change the note. And I think that's why in some of the pieces is like that early piano piece where it kind of sounds beautiful, they're going to the beach, but there's a wrong, like the piano player is playing something wrong, and that's a result of this mode. But I wrote some pieces, I sent them to Sam, he liked them. You were still shooting, I think, and you were about to go into the edit room. And then once you started editing, I'm writing more, and you're editing, I'm writing, and it's all happening at the same time, basically.
This is, by the way, he's underplaying this. This is not the way it typically happens, right? Composers do not compose music before you start shooting the movie. Typically, they do it after the movie's cut. And or they have to, we use temp music during editorial, and then, composers have to follow that temp. What Mac did was write music just based on our conversation. I'm playing it on the set, and then because I'm a crazy person, I like to edit with music. I don't edit picture dry, because I think music is the heart and soul of a movie. And so this is like something extraordinary that Mac pulled off. He's writing music without seeing a frame of the film, which is pretty extraordinary.
It was chaotic once we got rolling, and you're in the edit room, and I've written some music, but you're like texting me, "Hey, we need more music. Can you write?" So we're just scrambling, and we got to the finish line.
So Sam, how in the world did you direct those deer? No, it's just a... So Mac and Todd, both of you mentioned kind of breaking the rules or bumping up against the rules, and clearly this is, driven by your vision for it, Sam. And tonality is tricky. It may be the trickiest thing. Yeah. And I just there are very few filmmakers like yourself who are willing to put an audience in an uncomfortable situation these days. And so walking that razor's edge of enjoying our discomfort and at the same time, begging for more, do you find is that in the script stage? Or does that evolve as you work with the actors or in the edit bay? At what moment do you realize, I think this mashup of chaos and class and race is going to say what I want it to say?
It's iterative. It starts, obviously, in the script, but it goes into prep and production and post, and you're constantly bringing things together and seeing if this new alchemy is working. I mean, when you're doing a suspense thriller, the thing that you have to really be concerned about is not letting the audience be ahead of you. And the way you avoid that is by creating a sort of undefinable tone. Because, if you fall into the trappings, if I gave you the typical score that you would hear in a thriller, and we shot it in the typical way, and we didn't use pop songs, or we used creepy pop songs, you know how they do covers of pop songs that are slow, and to make it creepier, you know where shit's gonna go, and it takes all the tension out, and so you're undermining the audience, and the audience gets ahead of you, and the idea here is to create a tone that's unique to this story, that keeps you off balance just enough to keep you wanting more up until the very end. I mean, look, the ending, the ambiguity of the ending is by design. It was in the book, and in a different kind of incarnation, it was in the movie, because it was really important for us to tell a story without pulling punches, right? The movie is not going to give you easy answers or solutions to how we're going to survive this or how we're going to get through this. The movie just makes this proposition and then leaves you with those questions. just like in life, where we have to kind of face ambiguity on a day-to-day basis, just like when we went through the pandemic or any of these other crises that happens in the world. We never potentially get the final answer. And so that all gets kind of mixed up with tone. Tone is everything. And the minute the audience has your number on tone, that's the minute it kind of goes autopilot for them. And we always wanted to stay away from that.
And it goes back, interestingly, to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Absolutely. I
Like
mean,
when the sun comes up.
yeah. And you're watching that, by the way, brilliant movie if you haven't seen it. I think it's Mike Nichols' first movie, which is insane. But you're watching that movie and it starts off one way and it just keeps veering off in these directions and you're not quite sure where to place it. And then by the end of the movie, you have no idea what to think or feel.
Yeah.
And to me, as an audience member, that's the most exhilarating part of watching a movie, is when I don't know what's going to happen next, but I desperately want to. You know, that to me is like a gift that a filmmaker can give me as an audience member.
Well, mission accomplished on Leave the World Behind. I'm told we have one more minute, and so as not to overstay our welcome, I will simply say thank you for the exhilarating ride tonight, and for the character of Rosie, who I think we all we're all in her world with her Jennifer Aniston haircut and her begging for the happy ending. And thank you for giving us that happy ending. And thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you, guys.